we're just going to start off with the end.
Women earned 58 cents for every dollar men earned for the same work, and they made up 3% of Congress. Feminists demanded full equality, and Mink launched her own battle for America's women.
I came to Congress, joined the Education and Labor Committee, and we began to realize that although we had statutes on the books about equality and opportunity for everyone, that girls and women were being left out systematically.
Mink and Representative Edith Green co-authored Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. Title IX established equal opportunity for women in graduate school admissions, financial aid, and athletic programs.
She remembered her times in graduate school where she was the only woman in the class, only one of a handful of women in the whole school, and to her that just wasn't acceptable.
Title IX sailed through Congress, but controversy soon erupted. Before Title IX, 98% of college athletic budgets went to men's teams, but the new law required schools to provide opportunities for female athletes, leaving less money for men.
If we're asked to reduce expenditures in football drastically, then we'll fall out of the Big Time, we'll fall out of the Big Ten competitive structure, and we won't generate all those revenues. So the goose that laid the golden egg will be killed.
For 3 years, men's coaches lobbied to exempt college sports from Title IX. In July 1975, the final decision whether to keep sports part of Title IX came up for a vote. As debate began in the House, Mink got devastating news. Her daughter Gwendolyn was thrown through the windshield of a car.
She got this horrendous call in the cloakroom. So she went back and she just went right out the door, as she should. We said, get out of here, go, you know. So then there was the vote, and obviously she didn't show up on the roll call.
The consequence of her leaving is that the principle of full equality for women in education died that day. Our side lost that vote by 1 vote.
Mink, however, had a key ally, House Speaker Carl Albert. Because of Mink's family emergency, Albert scheduled a revote. With the Congresswoman back on the floor, this time the regulations to keep sports part of Title IX passed by 37 votes.
I never had in my dreams and expectations the notion that, for instance, medical schools across the country would be 50-50 men and women. That law schools would become 50-50 men and women, and so on down in the professions, and that it would change entirely the notion of careers for women.
Women have a tremendous responsibility to help shape the future of America, to help decide policies that will affect the course of our history, and women need to be represented.
In 1975, after more than a decade in the House, Mink gave up her seat and ran for the U.S. Senate. There were no women in the Senate, and no woman of color had ever been elected.
Patsy Mink, for all of us.
Congressman Spark Matsunaga, her colleague and a World War II veteran, later announced he too was running for Senate.
Spark Matsunaga was a classic old-style politician
It was shaking hands, it was going door to door, it was collecting interest groups that would help you out. Patsy Mink was a little bit more overhead. She felt that if she talked about the right issues at the right time, with the right ideas, the people would listen to her and vote for her.
Arguments were made in this race that the senior male, was entitled to the position, and she shouldn't be so uppity, and it wasn't her time.
So, as you can see, Patsy Mink was one of the, basically she was like the lead drive for pushing for Title IX. She had studied several subjects prior to going to law school, one of which is she actually went to graduate school and got her medical degree. And what pushed her into law school is the fact that because she was a woman and she was of color, no one would hire her, and she wanted to change that. And so she was one of the co-authors of Title IX, which amended the it was part of the Federal Education Act, which amended the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And therefore, once she became elected into Congress, Patsy Mink became the first woman of color to serve the U.S. Congress, and she's also the first Japanese-American woman to practice law in Hawaii. And Title IX states that no person in the United States shall, on the basis of sex, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any educational program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. So since the enactment of Title IX, women's participation in sports has grown exponentially. And the number of school athletes has increased from 1972, there was 295,000 to now there's more than 2.6 million female athletes. And the number of female enrollments in college has grown from 30,000 to more than 150,000. In addition, Title IX is also credited with decreasing the rates of girl dropout from high school and increasing the number of women who pursue higher education and complete their college degrees. As a result of Title IX, any school that receives any federal money from the elementary or university level, in short, nearly all schools, must provide fair and equal treatment of the sexes in all areas, including athletics. So many people have heard of Title IX, but most people don't know that Title IX, and most people that know about Title IX think it only applies to sports, but athletics is only one of 10 key areas. The other areas are access to higher education, career education, education for pregnant and parenting students, employment, learning environment, math and science, sexual harassment, standardized testing, and technology.
Okay, so I'm doing Title IX and gender bias. The first thing is, Alicia already said, Title IX forbids sexual discrimination in all student services and academic programs. So that's, not just K-12, it's also college. That includes, but are not limited to, financial aid, academic advising, housing, athletics, recreational services, college residential life programs, health services, counseling and psychological services, issues with the registrar's office, classroom assignments, grading and discipline. Title IX also forbids discrimination because of sex in employment and recruitment consideration or selection under any educational program that receives federal aid or assistance. There are some exceptions to the rule. Fraternities, they're obviously made up of men. Sororities, father-son or mother-daughter activities are excluded. Human sexuality courses, choir groups where men or women can't get to a certain octave, contact sports, and then single-sex schools. Okay, and for regulations and compliance, the Office of Civil Rights, or the OCR, is who is responsible for enforcing Title IX. Their responsibility to ensure that institutions who receive federal funds comply with Title IX is carried out through compliance reinforcement. The principal enforcement activity is the investigation and resolution of complaints filed by those who are alleging sexual discrimination. However, they don't have to a complaint in. Sometimes they'll just do a random selection and review and assess compliance with the school's Title IX. If there is a violation, then the OCR will attempt to obtain voluntary compliance and negotiate appropriate remedies. Title IX also protects people from sex discrimination in the workplace, which Adriana will cover next. In 2006, there were some changes added, except different exceptions, which are much more broader now, and they're just added for the K through 12 non-vocational single-sex schools, classes and extracurricular activities in elementary and secondary schools. And when these exceptions were added, instead of being more specific, like the first, fraternities, sororities, they're more vague, and they're examples of that are, some of them are exceptions if the achievement of an important governmental or educational objective is needed. There also is one that says to provide diverse educational opportunities, and then to meet particular identified educational needs of its students. So many supporters of Title IX believe that by allowing these exceptions, the whole purpose of Title IX is compromised. And what do you guys think? Do you think that the vagueness is better, or do you guys think that do you agree with the supporters that it makes it more, easy to be gender biased?
I think vague wording can only be meant to benefit the people that wrote it in the long term. I mean, if they wanted to be specific and give examples, that's one thing, but I'm always suspicious of vague comments like that and, vague statutes that can be open to interpretation.
Okay, women and men, including transsexual people, have the right not to be discriminated against at work because of their sex. There are 4 forms of discrimination recognized by the law. It's direct and indirect discrimination, it's harassment and victimization. Direct sex discrimination is less favorable treatment of a woman than a man, or vice versa, because of their sex. Harassment is sexual harassment, which is defined as unwanted behavior that takes place simply because someone is a woman or a man. Indirect discrimination is when an employer applies a provision, criterion, or practice equally to both women and men that puts one sex at an unfair disadvantage. And victimization is when an employee is treated less favorably than others because he or she made a complaint of discrimination or supports someone else to do it. As an example of a direct discrimination, I chose the case against Walmart because it's the biggest case in the U.S. What happened in 2001, a Walmart cashier in Pittsburgh, California, named Betsy Dukes sued the company, claimed that she was denied opportunities to advance despite good performance reviews. They wanted to transform because from other states came more and more and more women that worked at Walmart and felt the same things, that they were discriminated, and their attorneys wanted to turn this case into a class case. And the Walmart case went to court for 10 years. Eventually, the Supreme Court overturned the Duke's case in the summer of 2011, citing that the women did not share enough in common to qualify as a class in what would have been the largest class action discrimination suit in history. Since then, things have changed at Walmart, though. Maybe not all over the country, but most of the company's stores are more careful today when it comes to discrimination issues. And I found, you might think that this is stupid, I think too, but I think it's funny at the same time. I found a song that one of the Walmart employees wrote in, and the music and the lyrics and everything, which says something about how things were there.
Walmart, that's our store. We shop it there cause we're so poor. Well, I work there so I'm double poor. I can't even afford nothing in this store. to my plate again. I'm gonna get close to being tired, I ain't gonna wait again. Get in my car get it to that day again. Another big head mansion, snack, I see him talking. Well, I'm gonna sneak right past to the back and keep stalking. Stuck on the truck, I ain't gonna clock it. I saw my stuff, forgot to set 4 o'clock again. Every single day is another crazy battle as I straddle the saddle right up on State Creek with no truck and paddle. Red the Cadillac powder jack, pull the frame from out the back. Missing body stack, sweat, I turn around and look at smack. They go heavy boss on the taste of my face. Man, was that a box of rocks? Nah, I can't Walmart, that's our store. We shop there cause we're so poor. Well, I work there so I'm double poor. I can't even afford nothing in this store. Walmart, that's our store. We shop there cause we're so poor. Well, I work there so I'm double poor. I can't even afford nothing in this store. I'm lazy, maybe I'm crazy. Yes, you lady, I should like when I gave it up. Save me. I'm past the point of save, and I need a safe haven cause I'm sick of always slaving this lame and I'm hating what my pay and it sucks. Every 2 weeks, $432 bucks. So with the truck, they ain't enough. In a stupid job, makes me sleep for the best of the day. My kid wants to play, but I'm in a coma asleep. Trying to dream my stress away, and I need another job, but it's easier said than done. How do you think at the end she could look for another one? Now I know what you're thinking, that I'm a lazy slob, but I'm sore every day. My muscles ache and throb. Don't ask your truck, ain't no bluff. It's a mother aching job. Yo, Walmart, that's our.
Okay, I myself shop at Walmart, so I don't know if it's exactly the truth that we shop there because we are so poor. I don't know. Then I found some cases about, there are many cases with discrimination at work against women, against people with another sexual orientation. I just chose my case. I've told you why, because it was the biggest, and I also chose 2 cases that I'm going to talk right now about. According to Williams Institute on Sexual Orientation, Law and Public Policy, between 15 and 43% of people with a different sexual orientation have experienced discrimination or harassment in the workplace. Furthermore, only 21 states have passed laws banning discrimination based on sexual orientation. I have a case from, her name is Lisa Howe. She's from Tennessee. She was a former Belmont University soccer coach. She was fired in December 2010, so it's recently, after she came out to her soccer team and she said that she's a lesbian and announced that she and her partner were expecting their first child. While the university's official statement at first said that she has resigned, it was soon amended to say that the decision had been mutual and that her continuing to work for Belmont would not be beneficial to her or the university. Another case is Michael Carney from Massachusetts. He was a police officer from Springfield. He was one of the witnesses in the congressional hearing on the Employee Non-Discrimination Act. He initially left his job as a police officer due to the stress of remaining closeted by his former employers refused to hire him again after he came out. He fought for years to be allowed to work again, a battle that he eventually won. And here is the map with the states in the United States where you can be fired for being gay, and Michigan is one of them. And I have another case here, because I did a lot of research. I wanted to see how things are. In 2010, a jury in Portland has awarded Edward Russell more than $1 million in a discrimination case based on sexual orientation. This was the largest such award to date in Maine. And that's about it.
There's not much about sexual orientation because it's more of a new thing in Title IX. Mostly it talks about the abuse. There's verbal and non-physical, which is name-calling, obscene and suggestive cartoons, graffiti, and pornography. You see that more in the schools than you do in the workplace. In the workplace, they're more going to be feeling like they're mature about how they discriminate, whereas in the schools, it's going to be immature. And then the abuse can escalate quickly or slowly to physical, which can be unwanted sexual contact and physical violence. 84% of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender students are harassed verbally in the last year. 85% have heard staff or faculty make a homophobic comment. Those are big numbers for in a school. Most had difficulty in school and fear for their safety, and eventually ended up changing or dropping out of school.
Okay. Title IX in sports. Title IX does state that on the basis of sex, no one can be excluded from the participation in, denied benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any education program or activity. So that would include sports teams, gym classes, everything like that. Title IX has helped women and girls, men and boys benefit from more equitable treatment and to attain more equitable outcomes. Now, it does affect both men and women, although most of the cases were based on women, so that's what I'm going to focus on for this section. Prior to Title IX, there were 310,000 women in sports in America, so that's not a very high number. After Title IX was passed, this number increased to 3,373,000 women participating. Until the 70s, many colleges and universities refused to admit women. It was believed that women were more concerned about marriage and children than higher education. This ceased any chances of participating in sports or obtaining scholarships for them. There are some areas in which Title IX affects. So the benefits of sports would include equipment and supplies. So that means like the quality of the equipment can't be any less or any more based on your gender. The scheduling of games and practice time, it has to be split equally. Travel and per diem allowances, so modes of transportation, it can't be you can't be discriminated against at all, and all of this has to be shared equally. Opportunity to receive academic tutoring, so if you need tutoring in order to continue playing sports, that has to be provided for you. Opportunity to receive coaching, assignment, and compensation. Locker rooms, practice, competitive facilities. Medical and training facilities and services. Housing and dining facilities and services. Publicity, support services, recruitment of student athletes. So I read this list to you. We're going to watch a video now, and it's a success story about Title IX. And I want you to keep all these things in mind, because these are some of the things that affected them.
In high school, I was involved in the Title IX issue. My high school softball team wasn't getting the attention it needed compared to some of the other sports on campus.
One of the coaches actually stood up in front of all the parents and girls at the beginning of her junior year and announced that girls' sports don't matter at the school, but we're just going to have fun anyway.
The girls had to wait for the boys to be done with all of their practices before they were allowed on the fields.
The football team would run through our practices, sometimes even through our games over the summer.
The girls weren't allowed to use the workout facilities, the weight rooms, because the boys would use them throughout the day.
The softball coach took her into the locker room, or the weight room, to start working on a weight program. But when the football coach caught him in there, they threw him out and told him never to come back.
And the girls were also not allowed to use the batting cages in case the boys wanted to use them.
We didn't have access to the batting cages. We were supposed to be sharing them, but really that just meant the boys got to use them most of the time.
The girls' varsity field was run down. The benches were falling through. The diamond itself was unsafe for balls.
The fencing was too low. So whenever you were sitting in the dugout, if you knew that the girl liked to pull the ball foul, everyone would just have to squat down to make sure that they didn't get hit by a ball.
The girls ended up having to change in a dark storage container.
A shipping container instead of a locker room. And there was no lighting in there, so really we had to use our cell phones to light it.
The umpires were ready to start the game, and we had no chalk on the fields. And we could see the roll-up doors go up on the football warehouse, and there were 2 full pallets of chalk there. So I went over and just asked to get enough chalk just to fill my machine so I could line the field, but our request was denied.
One thing on top of the other kind of led me to want to change something at my school, just because by the time I started to become an upperclassman, it just was too much for even our team to perform and do well.
Originally, she tried talking to the administration, but they ignored her. My wife and I helped her and got involved. We tried to have meetings with the school. but we're pretty much ignored for almost 2 years.
My family and I decided that we really couldn't solve this on our own.
I found some good resources about Title IX and really what our rights were under the law with Title IX. And so we contacted the California Women's Law Center, who had a lot of this literature on their website, and we were able to educate ourselves and ask some questions of their staff and figured out that we really did have a path for us to reach out to the school and try to come to an understanding and some awareness about what needed to happen as a next step. Thanks to the California Women's Law Center, we were able to find a way to do this that was a conversation and a negotiation rather than having to litigate. And so we didn't have to litigate. We were able to come to an agreement.
We currently have a new locker room that has lighting and enough space for everyone to put their stuff. We have new fencing so that everyone can actually stand up in the dugout and not be worried about getting hit by foul balls.
The varsity field is being redone this year, so it's going to have a regulation-sized field.
The bleachers are also going to be put in soon. There's talk of designs for a new batting cage.
The new coach is on board. She has a 4-year contract, so we won't be turning over coaches every year. And this is a coach that actually knows something about softball.
The soccer field that goes through our outfield is going to be moved. They're going to redraw the field so that everyone can share the space.
The girls are very proud of their program now. They finally got their new uniforms after so many years.
And more importantly, once attention was brought to the program and we started seeing changes, we started seeing more people coming to the games.
All of a sudden, we had many, many new fans attending the games. A lot of the boys from the boys team were starting to come over and watch. And you could just feel a change in the energy around this program.
It really just improved the softball program overall because I feel like we played better knowing that everybody supported us and that we could get the school to back us up.
For the parents and the players and the school, it became a source of pride instead of a source of contention.
One of the things that my daughter said is that this is really a generational thing. The boys and girls at the high school.
Okay, so that gives you most of the story, and I just wanted to put that in there because that is a very positive case that happened. Like, they could get through that, like, with negotiation, like they said in that. But some cases, it took for girls' sports teams to start winning and getting things for their school, like money and everything, in order for the school to start abiding by Title IX. So now we're going to move on to Janelle.
Recently, Title IX had started working on equal and fairness opportunities for parenting students. They just got a big boost from the federal government. The United States Department of Education took action to make sure teen girls are given the same access to education and opportunities as their peers. Pregnancy is the #1 reason teen girls drop out of school. The Department of Education states that over 50% of girls that do give birth drop out of school and or are discouraged from coming to school or put into alternative programs. Under Title IX, pregnant and parenting students must have equal access to schools and equal access availability to education opportunities. Unfortunately, this is not the case. Too often, students are not excused for pregnancy-related doctor's appointments. The teachers are refusing them to make up their work, and counselors and teachers are pushing them more